Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Always excited to dig into something new.
Well, today we're tackling a pretty big figure, literally and figuratively.
Sounds intriguing. Who are we focusing on?
Queen Elizabeth II, but with a twist.
Okay, now you've got my attention. What's the twist?
We're looking at her through the lens of her French Wikipedia entry.
Oh, that's fascinating. It's like getting a glimpse into how another culture views this global icon.
Exactly. And I'm really curious to see what jumps out at us, what they choose to emphasize, or maybe even what they overlook that we might take for granted.
Yeah, absolutely. Should we jump right in?
Let's do it. So one thing that struck me right away was how the French entry really highlights her adaptability. It's almost like a recurring theme throughout.
Interesting. I mean, when you think about it, her reign spanned such a period of immense change, right? And so it makes sense that adaptability would be key.
Totally. I mean, think about it. She wasn't even supposed to be queen, right?
Oh, right. Princess Elizabeth, third in line to the throne.
Exactly. And then her uncle, Edward VIII, abdicates. It's like something out of a movie.
It completely changed the course of history.
And I mean, imagine being 10 years old and suddenly your entire life is redirected like that.
Yeah, the entry really emphasizes this shift, this dramatic contrast between her idyllic childhood and then, bam, suddenly this weight of responsibility.
Like a real-life fairy tale turned upside down.
They even mention her childhood nickname, Lilibet, and how much she was adored by her grandfather, King George V. It really paints a picture of this, well, almost sheltered upbringing.
And then just a few years later, World War II erupts. Talk about another layer of complexity.
Oh, absolutely. And they make a point of mentioning how she stayed in Britain despite the risks, even joining the Auxiliary Territorial Service.
I remember reading about that. Imagine a future queen training as a mechanic.
Right. It definitely shows a different side to her.
And of course, her wartime radio address to evacuated children. I mean, she was just 14 at the time.
Shows her poise and ability to connect with the public, even in a crisis.
So maybe those are the early glimpses of that adaptability shining through, huh?
I think you might be right.
Now, let's move on to another aspect of her life that I found interesting in the French entry. Her relationship with Prince Philip.
Ah, yes. Not all smooth sailing, as they point out.
Not at all. They highlight the controversies surrounding their relationship. Philip's foreign origins, his lack of wealth, his family ties to Germany. It was a lot for people to swallow back then.
Really underscores how different the world was, right? Royal marriages weren't just about love.
No, definitely not. It was about strategy, politics, maintaining a certain image.
Absolutely. And even after their wedding in 1947, the challenges kept coming. The entry mentions Princess Margaret's desire to marry Peter Townsend.
Oh yeah, the Peter Townsend affair. That caused quite a stir, didn't it?
Big time. A divorced man. The article highlights the constitutional and religious obstacles they faced.
A lot of pressure on Elizabeth, navigating all of that, not just as a monarch, but as a sister, too.
Right. Trying to balance duty and family.
It's interesting that the French entry focuses on this. It shows a more personal side to her.
Yeah, it's not just about the crown and the politics. It's about family conflicts, personal dilemmas.
Right. So we've got this young princess thrust into the spotlight, a wartime experience that probably shaped her character, a whirlwind romance that wasn't without its hiccups, and now family drama brewing.
It's almost like a build-up, isn't it? Setting the stage for her becoming queen.
And what a dramatic transition it was. She's on a Commonwealth tour in Kenya when she gets news of her father's death.
Wow. Talk about a whirlwind. Suddenly at 25, she's Queen Elizabeth II.
I can only imagine what must have been going through her mind at that moment.
It's remarkable how quickly she had to step into the role.
And of course, the French entry doesn't shy away from some of the immediate challenges.
Oh, absolutely. Like the debate over the royal house name, Mountbatten or Windsor.
Oh, right. Philip wanted his children to bear his name.
Understandably so.
But tradition won out in the end.
The entry even quotes him saying, "I am the only man in the country not allowed to give his name to his own children."
That's got to sting a bit.
Yeah, especially for someone who always seems so supportive of his wife's role.
It shows that behind the royal facade, they were real people dealing with real emotions.
Absolutely. But perhaps even more significant than the name debate was the decision to televise the coronation.
Oh, yeah. A first in history.
A new era for the monarchy.
Genius move, wouldn't you say?
Definitely. It brought the monarchy into the living rooms of millions.
And the article highlights the symbolism of her coronation gown, how it was designed to represent the Commonwealth.
Smart move.
She understood the importance of connecting with people both at home and across the globe.
And that connection would become even more crucial as she witnessed the dismantling of the British Empire.
And the rise of the Commonwealth, a whole new landscape to navigate.
Definitely a whole new act was beginning.
So much happened during her reign. It's mind-boggling when you really start to list it all out.
Yeah, the world was transforming around her, and yet she remained this constant, this symbol of stability.
Exactly. It's almost hard to grasp the scale of change she witnessed.
And the French Wikipedia entry really dives into some of the specific challenges she faced, politically and socially.
Like what, for example?
Well, the Suez Crisis, for one. They highlight that as a moment where she reportedly clashed with her prime minister.
Ooh, interesting. I always find it fascinating when those behind-the-scenes conflicts come to light.
Right. Gives you a glimpse into how she wielded her influence even early on in her reign.
It wasn't just symbolic. She had opinions. She wasn't afraid to assert herself.
Exactly. And remember, this was a time when the monarch's role was still evolving, right?
Oh, yeah. So her actions, even her perceived opinions, carried a lot of weight.
Absolutely. And her influence wasn't just limited to Britain either. The entry talks about her addressing the United Nations, opening the Canadian Parliament. It really highlights that multifaceted role she had as head of the Commonwealth.
It's true. We often forget that she wasn't just Queen of the UK. She was a symbol for this vast, diverse group of nations.
A group that was facing its own set of challenges, too. Decolonization movements, the Rhodesian crisis, even Republican sentiments in Australia.
Wow. It must have been a constant balancing act for her, trying to uphold tradition while acknowledging the need for change.
Absolutely. And then on top of all that, you have the personal threats she faced. Assassination attempts, security breaches the entry, doesn't shy away from the dangers inherent in her position.
It's easy to forget that behind the crown, she was a human being with real vulnerabilities.
Right, and those vulnerabilities were further exposed as she faced a series of personal trials later in her reign.
Oh, absolutely. The breakdown of her children's marriages. The fire at Windsor Castle, the entry, refers to 1992 as her annus horribilis, her horrible year.
And then, of course, 5 years later, the tragic death of Princess Diana.
That event sent shockwaves around the world.
Yeah, it did. And the public's reaction to the royal family's initial response was, well, it was pretty critical.
There was this feeling that they were out of touch.
You know.
Too distant from the grief everyone was feeling.
And that's where I think Elisabeth's adaptability really shines through. Her decision to address the nation directly, expressing her personal grief, acknowledging the public's feelings, it was a pivotal moment.
It was a real departure from that traditional stoicism we'd come to expect from the monarchy.
Right. And the entry points out that this was also a time when she made other concessions, bowing to public pressure.
Like paying income tax, opening Buckingham Palace to the public.
Exactly. These symbolic gestures that acknowledged the shifting relationship between the monarch and the people.
She seemed to understand that to stay relevant, the monarchy had to evolve.
Absolutely. And this evolution continued even as she celebrated all those milestones. The Silver Jubilee, the Golden Jubilee, Diamond, and then Platinum.
Those jubilees must have been something else, right?
Yeah.
All the pomp and circumstance.
Oh, I bet. Huge spectacles. But they were more than just celebrations, right? They were opportunities for her to reflect, to reaffirm her commitment to service, and to connect with her people.
All while the world kept changing around her.
Right. I mean, think about it. The end of the Cold War, globalization, the rise of the internet, the challenges of terrorism. Her reign really spanned a period of immense technological and social upheaval.
And yet, she remained a constant. And she wasn't afraid to engage with contemporary issues either, right?
Not at all. The article mentions her addressing climate change, the COVID-19 pandemic. It wasn't like she was just this figurehead from a bygone era.
No, she was a voice of reason, of stability, in a world that often felt like it was spinning out of control.
Exactly. And then, of course, there was Brexit.
Oh, yeah. A decision that really divided the nation. I remember watching her address after the referendum.
Me too.
She called for unity, for respect, urging people to come together despite their differences.
A classic example of her rising above the political fray.
Being that symbol of unity in a time of division. And all while dealing with personal loss, too. The death of Prince Philip after more than 70 years of marriage.
I can't even imagine.
It must have been incredibly difficult. And yet, she carried on. The public appearances, the duties, never letting her personal grief overshadow her commitment to her role.
That stoicism, that dedication, is something a lot of people admired about her.
Yeah. It's interesting that the French entry picks up on that. It shows they recognized the human being beneath the crown,
Yeah, the woman who faced the same joys and sorrows as anyone else while shouldering the weight of an entire nation's expectations.
It's funny, looking back at the whole Queen Elizabeth's reign through this French lens, it's striking how they frame it.
Yeah, it's not just about the events themselves, right? It's about what those events tell us about how the monarchy changed.
Exactly. And that's what I keep coming back to. I mean, she inherited a world that was so different from the one she left behind. So how does she manage to keep the monarchy relevant amidst all that upheaval?
It is the million-dollar question. And I think the French entry gives us some clues. They really highlight those wartime experiences, her commitment to the Commonwealth, and then all those calculated steps towards modernizing the monarchy.
Yeah, it's like she was always walking this tightrope between tradition and progress.
Exactly. I mean, think about it. Decolonization, the Cold War, economic crises, the explosion of technology and social media. It's amazing the monarchy survived all that.
But it did. More than survive, it thrived. And I think a big part of that is because Elizabeth understood that survival meant adaptation.
Right, like paying taxes, opening up Buckingham Palace. Those weren't just symbolic gestures, they were real changes.
They showed she was willing to move with the times.
And it's interesting, the French entry even points to her embrace of technology. The televised coronation, the Christmas broadcast, even that James Bond skit at the Olympics.
Oh, yeah. That was brilliant.
It's like she understood the power of imagery, of connecting with people in a way that felt more immediate, more personal.
And that's where her personal life plays a role, too, right? She was queen, yes, but also a wife, a mother, a grandmother. Those roles humanized her.
Absolutely. They made her relatable to people who might otherwise see the monarchy as this distant, irrelevant institution.
It's that balance she struck, isn't it? The regal authority combined with a genuine warmth.
Yeah, not an easy thing to pull off. And I think that's what this French perspective really helps us appreciate. It wasn't just the length of her reign. It was her ability to embody both continuity and de-change.
Powerful legacy.
Definitely.
We started this deep dive talking about Queen Elizabeth's adaptability. And it seems like that's the thread that ties it all together.
It really does. From a princess unexpectedly thrust into the spotlight to this global icon navigating a world in constant flux, it's quite a story.
It is. And it makes you wonder, what will stand out most to future generations? Will it be those political maneuvers, her personal resilience, or just the fact that she was such a steadying presence in a world that so often felt chaotic?
That's a good question. Guess we'll have to wait and see what the history books say.
That's true. Well, a huge thank you to our expert for guiding us through all of this and for unearthing these fascinating insights from the French Wikipedia entry.
It was a pleasure to be here.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us for another deep dive. We hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and as always, keep diving deep.